Jeremy, do you think at a certain point in time, I understand this is going to be a very long proceedings and it might take longer than expected, but do you think at a certain point in time, can we have a criminal case in a world wide case against the Chinese government? Because so far as of today, and I can't even, every time I recall, I say the number, a couple of hours, the number changes like
Right.
crazy. So far, we have over 180,000 deaths in the world, and next week that could be, more than 200. Can that be a criminal case at a certain point?
Well, I just saw on one of the news stations that the death toll worldwide is now 228,000,
Oh,
which is,
look at that! I'm already outdated.
well, I think it's because they recalculated the way that they're assessing the death toll. I think
Okay.
they're retesting and stuff, so I think that's changing. But criminally, I don't see a criminal case in our U.S. courts. Our U.S. courts would be the seat for civil cases. The
Okay.
question I think that is relevant to can they be held to be prosecuted criminally is, did individuals in the Chinese government or in the CCP intentionally act in a way to cause knowing harm and death to individuals? And I think that the international court would be the forum for that. The international court, which China's part of the Hague Convention, one of 30 countries, and I think the court that is affiliated with that jurisdiction would be the place to do that. And I think that countries, not individuals, but countries would have to bring the charges against Chinese individuals in the international court to do that. The one thing I will say that George brought up, which is an excellent point, we are working with people from Congress, and individuals from Congress have already presented bills on stripping sovereign immunity from this particular case. I think Senator Hawley put forth a bill. Tom Cotton did some work on a bill. These brave senators are stepping out against the world superpower, just like our clients are stepping out and standing up against a world superpower. If China was stripped of its sovereign immunity for the purposes of this case, for the purposes of this action, which can happen in Congress, if that were to happen, there is no better way to hit China with responsibility than in their pocketbook. The United States makes up a large portion of their GDP when we take in their exports and use them as goods. The United States has tremendous control over that situation, because if we simply don't want to do business with them, there are parts of our economy where we can just stop. We can say we're not doing it anymore. And I think that applies tremendous pressure, and that pressure gets amplified immensely if there is no sovereign immunity whatsoever and they're stripped of it. So the US Congress has the ability to do that. And we have the ability to hit them right where it hurts in their GDP and make them pay for this. This is something, lives aren't coming back. The money isn't coming back that we've spent and lost. The 30 million jobs aren't coming back today. But we need to put the United States in a position to bring those things back, obviously, unfortunately, without bringing back the people who have passed away. But we need to hold China accountable for what they've done. And I think stripping them of sovereign immunity, even maybe more so than a criminal court action, because they will lie, they will hide evidence, they will do everything. But what they can't do is run from the truth. And the truth is, they failed to contain this virus and then they lied about it. And we in a civil court of law can hold them accountable for that. And without any sovereign immunity hurdles on that track, we are in a full 400-meter sprint.
George, based on what you read on the news and for the last few years, or actually for the last couple of decades, we've been relying completely on the Chinese manufacturers to supply us with important medical and personal protective equipment, which they have been hoarding in the last 3 months to try to leverage the world and leverage the U.S. in specific. Do you think this should change in the next few years, or actually relatively sooner, the next few months? Should we bring in manufacturing here in the U.S. or partner up with other countries that respect the friendship and relationship between the countries, rather than hoarding the equipment the same way China is doing now?
Absolutely, Michael. I think if there's one thing that we've learned from this terrible situation, if there's one positive that I can highlight, is that we are now acutely aware of the fact that we cannot rely on vital items. Let's take, for example, since you mentioned it, pharmaceutical goods. It's shocking to me that 90 to 95% of our antibiotics, for example, I mean, antibiotics, these are regular medications that Americans use and rely on every day. It's astounding to me that we no longer produce these products. They're all made in China. But if you think about it, we're all guilty of how we ended up here. I mean, this is really the culmination of 20 years of, I'd rather pay $1 instead of $2 to get a cheaper product. I think that was really a line of thinking that we're all guilty of doing. And when you see what happened with COVID, it really highlights some of the deficiencies that the United States faces with basic distribution chains, and not just in pharmaceuticals, but across the board. There are many other products, things like rare earth minerals and others. The good news is, and I've personally been involved with some of these matters, this current administration has finally confronted some of these problems and are working towards change. And I think those initiatives are going to be accelerated. Obviously, the situation we're in, it's now elevated to, these are matters now that are of national security. It's not just about trade or about saving money. They've elevated to a point of national security.
Absolutely.
So yes, something has to be done. And this administration, more so than perhaps prior administrations, has recognized that issue and is finally moving forward and implementing changes so that perhaps fast forward a year or two, we're not as vulnerable as we are now.
Jeremy, for the last 10 years, we've been hearing about the intellectual property theft by the Chinese into the U.S. market. And we lately heard about the arrest of one of the chairmen at Harvard University in the biological and chemistry department. Yeah. And I don't want to link the two together because we don't know if this has something to do with the coronavirus in particular, but what I believe it has something to do with the intellectual property theft in general. What's your take on this?
For a decade or so, we have allowed China to unknowingly and knowingly all at once steal our proprietary information. When they do it and it affects the US or citizens of the US, it is harmful. When they do it and it infects the entire population of the United States and sends the economy into a downward spiral as a result, we have to finally say enough is enough. How many times are we going to let them get away with stealing our intellectual property, stealing and not informing us of information we need to know on the world stage to protect our people, not letting the world know of problems that are going on, not letting the world know of issues that could be relevant to them and harm them in their country. The people that we have spoken to, the thousands of plaintiffs that we have spoken to, finally say enough is enough. We are at that crossroads moment where maybe we have to do some business with China because that's the way the world works, but we don't need to do all of the business we've been doing. And the more business we do with them, the more intellectual property that can be stolen. And literally, it is time to say, through a movement of massive amounts of people, enough is enough. And I think that's where we're at. I think we're at that crossroad right now.